Hello, Learning to Serve students. It is July 5th. I hope that you had a good holiday weekend, and now we've got to get right back at it. In the lesson notes for today, I pointed out that we are having our emphasis placed on getting that final proposal, the final draft of your proposal. Now that you've had a chance to review my comments and look at what I wrote on those, we want those final proposals to be submitted to the assignments area in the Dropbox that have been set up for that in the course. So that's your primary focus in this lesson on Tuesday, between now and Thursday, to get those reports in really good shape. And so to facilitate that, I am not having you complete any quizzes or forums in our lesson for today, and instead I'm going to go over some elements from your reading, and that should serve as the part that would normally be a classroom discussion, or what you would sort of perform in a quiz to show me that you read it. So it's very important that you read chapter 8 and 9, and particularly chapter 9, which is what I'm going to talk about primarily in this screencast. So chapter 9 focuses mostly on what to do when things go wrong. And I wanted to have you focus on this chapter. There's chapter 8 as well that is on your reading docket for today, and please do take a look at that chapter in your book. That has to do mostly with leadership skills, and and that goes to a certain extent with what I'm going to be talking about with chapter 9 as well, in that we have to anticipate, now that we're finishing up our proposals, what's going to happen when we actually go and do our service. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on chapter 9, which really does concentrate on the specifics of what happens when things go wrong in your service activity, and we haven't even done our service activities yet for most of you, is because if we concentrate on this chapter now, it can help us as we're doing our final edits on our proposals to think about our service projects, which we're going to begin in earnest next week, and to anticipate where there might be some areas that we need to prepare a little bit more for, and anticipate where there might be some issues and concerns. So this chapter hopefully will help you with that, and then elements of this chapter will be integrated through the next two writing projects, particularly in the service logs that you'll be working on, and then especially in the final report that you'll do to class, the report that you'll do at the end of the course, where you go over everything that you anticipated doing in your proposal, which you're turning in on Thursday, and what actually happened in your service. And inevitably things will go wrong, and that's unfortunate and difficult to deal with, and it's not fun for anybody, but those are also moments that can contribute to the reflection that you do in your final report. I anticipated doing these things. These roadblocks occurred in the way of my service, and I had to overcome them in the following ways. That is part of the reflective element of the report that you're going to write at the end of the course. So that's actually something that you should be prepared to confront. Let's dig into this a little bit deeper by looking at our syllabus, actually. So if you go to our course and you click on the syllabus, you'll pull up this following document, and you'll see that what we're doing is we're going through the phases of building the service project here, as in the syllabus, where you've worked on this proposal, and now you have an action plan. You're filling out the ALPS plan from the book and all the sort of stuff that you're going to turn in on Thursday, and you have a very specific set of activities and elements that you're going to do for your 15 hours of service to try and address the community need or issue that you identified in your proposal. The next phase, in the next 2 weeks of the class, starting next week, you will connect to the community, and you will go and do your service hours, and there's some materials that I will post on Thursday that are these service logs and other elements that will help you put together a detailed sort of report of what you've done in your service project. And then finally, there's this reflection, this final report for the end of the class, and this is where chapter 9 sort of comes into play. It says, reflect. Near the end of the term, you will wrap up the trial phase of the project and complete a final report reflecting upon what worked and didn't work in your project, what you would refine or change going forward, your future plans with the project, and a detailed reflection of what you learned from your experiences in the community. And this you will present to the rest of the class in your final formal report. And I also wanted to stress this from the syllabus. This is from the FYI, the first year inquiry requirements for the course. Student learning outcome number 1. Students will describe and practice skills involved in critical inquiry and creative problem solving through interdisciplinary collaborative engagement of a specific issue or theme. Creative problem solving. So that's really what we're talking about today as you get ready to go and do your service, and what Chapter 9 really focuses on a great deal. And believe me, things will go wrong. I've done this class enough and have had students encounter many issues and conflicts that they had to overcome, and I'll share some of those with you here in just a moment. But I did want to stress this. Since we know that things will go wrong, and we know that we're going to need to write about those for our final report for the class as part of our growth and our inquiry and how we had creative problem solving as we see in that outcome, one of the things to keep in mind is what the expectations are. So if you look on page 141 in Chapter 9 of your book, you'll notice there's this exercise 9.2, and this is what I would normally have you complete if you were doing a quiz. But again, I wanted to free up time for you to work on your proposals. And so one of the things it says in exercise 9.2 is it asks you to have sort of a realistic sense of what the stakes are for when there are problems or mistakes that occur. In what ways does this course allow for success and failure? And I wanted to stress that in the reports that you're submitting this week, this first written document where you say what your goal is, what you want to do, that is very much a goal. And if you don't achieve all those goals and you've earnestly tried and you can report on that at the end of the course, you're not going to lose points for that, right? So if your service project doesn't come out exactly as you planned, and they never do, that's okay. What you'll need to do is represent in your final report the opportunities you had to learn and reflect upon what went right or didn't go right in your service activities. But one of the things you need to do is, in the meantime, you need to be on top of things so that you are able to overcome those issues and conflicts as they occur. And Chapter 9 goes a long ways towards trying to address those issues. So on page 141 and 142, and again, normally I would have you do a quiz to make sure that you've read this material and you've gone over it very thoroughly, but I'm just going to do the screencast as a way of sort of pinpointing a few areas. Please read this chapter and have it as a resource for when you go in and do your service, and then more importantly when you do your reflection afterwards. But as far as overcoming conflict, the chapter takes you through several areas that are very common. So one of the areas that you'll probably confront will be cultural difference. So you're going into areas that you may not be familiar with, and this section of the book goes through how to sort of adjust yourself to different cultures, different socioeconomic areas that you might not be familiar with, social stereotypes, and how these can sometimes become conflicts that you have to overcome in order to do the effective service. The other thing that comes up oftentimes is the expectation. So you go into a site, it's unfamiliar to you, it's uncomfortable, and that's part of the inquiry process as well, right? But the other thing is expectations, and we run into this a lot. So when you have people working together, that's the thing that's hard to predict, people's behaviors. And so the expectations that you have as a student, the expectations that your instructor has, and the expectation of your community partner are all going to be quite different. You know that you have to write a report about this. You know that you're doing this for a college class. Keep in mind that the people you're helping, the people that you're working with in your service projects, they might have completely different expectations. And part of their expectations might also be, it's kind of a hassle to try and deal with this person who's not only here to provide service, but also they are asking me all these questions. And you just have to go into that with the understanding of what the expectations are so that you can be adaptable and flexible in those circumstances. The next part of the book on page 143 to 144 talks about some of the common issues that will come up that you maybe should anticipate. So staff changes, it happens all the time. You'll be working with one person and then another person will come in and that be the person that you have to work with in your community partner. So be aware of that. Infrastructure changes, the very place that you're working, the facilities might change. You need to be flexible and adaptable so that you can overcome these issues. And the perception of need or the community issue if you're going into a community where you're doing some mentoring, for example, and your perception is that it's mostly an issue with drug abuse or something like that, and the community partner you're working with is saying, no, it's mostly an issue of a lack of employment, you're going to have some conflicts that you're going to have to overcome in order to understand what the area of tension is there and how to resolve it. So we want to keep these in mind as we go forward and use the book as a resource to overcome some of those concepts. By far the most difficult challenge that students face in their service activities is dealing with others, both classmates, the instructor, the community partners, the unpredictable folks in the sites that you might be at. And one of the things that is very helpful in your book is this checklist on page 145 and 146 that can take you through a set of processes to resolve conflict. Identify the root of the conflict, listen carefully to others' views on the nature of the conflict. There's a whole checklist of issues here, and what you need to be prepared for having some sort of conflict and being able to come back to this worksheet in this workbook and find ways to make sure that you're responding in ways that are productive so that you can overcome, listen carefully to others' views on the nature of the conflict, work together to focus on the sources, demonstrate that everyone's views have been understood. It's really just a checklist that takes you through several of these elements. The final example they have here is this do process. Describe what you observe, understand socioeconomic, cultural, and personality differences, and encourage communication. This is key in every element of it. So I'm going to share some examples with you from the class that have occurred in the past where I know that students have had to confront these issues. And I really like this do process. If nothing else from the chapter, if you think about it, this will help a great deal. So describe what you observe, okay? Feelings are not facts. So you may feel frustrated and upset about something that's going on in the circumstance, but take a moment and sit down and describe what are the facts, what's actually going on here, what do I actually know is the situation versus what I'm speculating or my feelings, my emotions are getting in the way of. Understand what is going on in that other person's mind. You don't know the battles they're fighting. You don't know what's going on in their background. We have a tendency to prejudge people. So you want to hold off and understand that there might be some circumstances that you're not aware of and that the person isn't even able to share with you that may be affecting this situation. So you want to be sensitive to that. And then encourage communication. Communication is the key. You have to talk things out. You have to work things through. And I'm not just talking about when there's conflict. So let me share with you a couple of specific examples in the last two or 3 minutes that we have here in this screencast. I had some students whose service project was to do a food drive at the middle school. And they went up and they had this great idea. This was the inquiry element. They were going to gather food and they're going to have a contest and have all the students compete with each other and fill up boxes. And then each classroom and teacher in their classroom could compete. And then there would be a prize given out. And they even went so far as to get these free meal coupons that Pizza Hut had sponsored it here in town. So they had this really great idea. They brought the boxes up to the middle school and they went back 2 weeks later and the boxes were still sitting in the corner. Now part of the issue there is that the principal thought he understood what the students were doing and there was a miscommunication and the boxes never got distributed. The students didn't make clear explicit instructions and more importantly they never monitored or followed through. That's the thing you're going to have to learn about your service projects. You've got to follow through. You can't just ask somebody to do something and then just assume it gets done because people are very busy. If they had gone back to the school a couple days later to ensure that the boxes had been distributed, if they had done a better job of communicating their goals with the project, they would have had much more success. Another example is I had some students who were at a nursing home and they were going to do these oral histories. And they were told by a supervisor there, well, I don't think that would be good because you might get into some privacy issues. And the students just said, oh, okay, well, we won't do that. And it was a great project they had in mind. And if they had just worked it out a little bit more, had the person contact me, I think we could have resolved those issues about the privacy. Just a couple of examples that really relate to miscommunication and needing to overcome not being on the same page. I'm going to pause the screencast here and have one additional moment that's going to deal with more serious and difficult issues that emerge. So please watch the next part.